And so they represent a microcosm of the challenges and problems that exist for individuals, children, families, and entire communities out there. And we've been using the Thompson family and their trials and tribulations to help inform the requirements for Project Unify. And as a consequence, the Project Unify vision is to implement a proof of concept for how to solve the various and sundry problems, challenges, speed bumps associated with coming up with a replicable standards-based information sharing and interoperability between healthcare, human services, education, housing, the courts, all the different aspects, all the different agencies, community-based organizations, et cetera, that help to contribute to the well-being of children, individuals, families, and entire communities. The goal is to be able to to work together collaboratively to come up with open APIs, open data standards, open source code that could then be uh, built upon um, in a replicable fashion across communities, across different states to solve these problems in ways that are specific to the local community's needs, but which do so based on broader nationwide standards. Those goals include to demonstrate the exchange of data and across multiple different information domains, and do so using either source or target domain-specific standard protocols. And along the way, identify, well, what are the governance issues that we need to address in order to enable this kind of data exchange. One of the issues that we know exists uh, is identity matching or patient matching in some contexts, client matching in others. We call it person matching, um, to be able to ensure that when we're exchanging information, that we know this information is associated with this specific person in this system and the same specific person in another system, and figure out how to do so using, again, in industry standards. Great cross-domain data maps and reusable interfaces, protocols, APIs, based on standards, and incorporate and use industry standard security and privacy mechanisms to ensure that when information is exchanged, it is properly protected. And finally, to create a repository of blueprints, if you will, whether it's in the form of specifications, open source code, open API, or open data standards, that will then enable others to come along after us and use those same specifications to create to create solutions of their own. Why are open standards important? Well, you need to be able to know what information is available out there for an individual, for a family, or for a community. So data discoverability is critical, and very often the information you're looking for is buried in non-electronic records, or they're buried in electronic textual records, documents where you cannot identify what is the piece of information that really matters to you right now. Even if you can get at the information electronically, do you have common data semantics, common terminology you're using to describe this information? If you may know what the semantics are of the information, but be using two different syntactic representations of that data between the two different information domains. And finally, even if you have common data syntax, you may not be using the same information exchange protocols. So the wonderful thing is that once you have common discovery, syntax, semantics, syntax, and protocols, you can then make use of that to improve workflow automation, where data is shareable. You can reduce duplicate data entry, reduce the associated typos and mistakes that happen along the way in entering data multiple times, and also automatically deduplicate information that is in your systems. You also have a better chance of being able to do what we call 360-degree person-centered care or case management by being able to associate information from healthcare and social services, education, and the courts together. And finally, with that standard foundation, you have the opportunity for really advancing well-being across all of population. You're using the Project Unify user stories to actually um, solve the problem of um, how do you deal with this big intractable problem by focusing in on specific user stories within the Thompson family and identifying within a homeless SDOH use case, what is the specific information we need to be able to exchange? What do we need to standardize in order to make that possible? What protocol do we need to use for that? We're doing a demonstration today of a single parent SDOH use case and have a homeless COVID use case coming up next month. Then for the few months after that, we'll be diving deep into the integrated care for kids user story in which 10-year-old Jameson is found to have a substance abuse problem, and the family has court service plans that need to be addressed and health care plans. This involves the exchange of cross-domain information between multiple different domains: healthcare, child, youth, and family services, family court, the school systems, housing and homelessness agencies, and of course, social determinants of health information out of individuals and family health records. In order to enable the exchange of this information, we know that there are a lot of different speed bumps involved. And so we have working groups within Project Unify addressing things like person matching, security, privacy, consent, um, uh, data standards, and standard protocols, for instance. I'm not going to get into all of the gory details. This incredibly busy slide is simply to point out that we are looking at a lot of details in a number of different areas to try to ensure that we get, that we document the blueprints necessary for moving forward on this. Our architecture team has put together a kind of a big picture view of what are the different components we need to worry about. One of the first that we've addressed is the user experience component. And for that, I yield to Dave Walsh, who is heading up the user experience working group. Dave, all yours for.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so my name is Dave Walsh. I am technical, but I'm going to try and stay up a little bit as we go through these conversations. And my background has got about 2 decades of Medicaid work. So certainly familiar with Medicaid and some of their initiatives to achieve interoperability, the MITA initiative and so forth. So what my goal is to bring together a user experience for this Unify opportunity. And what that means is we see that there are going to be a myriad of different services out there. And our focus is to have one capability that can access all of those different services. So as we talked a little bit ago, Daniel Stein brought up the age-old slide of skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's exactly what we're attempting to do, is to take a look at where technology is going to, and not architect something that was good 2 years ago, but rather architect something that is good for the next 10 years, if you will. So really looking at it. We're also very focused on this user experience component about being open source, and open source the code for what you're going to see in the demonstration later is actually available online, so you can download it and start using it and modifying it if you choose to. We're also growing a community called Slack, and Slack is a capability for developers to exchange ideas, approaches, and so forth. And right now, we have reached what we would call a MVP, or minimally viable product that you can actually use and learn more about. It supports many things such as bidirectional user interfaces. So it might be Arabic going from right to left, or English or French going from left to right. So our goal is to build a framework that will allow you to build applications, or to modify applications that we currently have and that you can build. Next slide. The target platforms that we're building to, and at the end of this presentation or shortly thereafter, you're going to see some demonstrations of what we currently have available. And our target platforms are going to be mobile, so you can do it on either an iPhone or an Android phone. I run these applications on either an iPhone or an Android, or in a browser, or on a desktop. Our goal is really write the program once and run it wherever the clients need to have access to their information. Next slide. So what we have accomplished so far is an implementation of the Gravity questionnaire, the social determinants of health, and a new needs assessment tool. So that is currently available. Within the next week or so, it will be downloadable from either the Apple App Store or the Android Play Store. So people can start to kick the tires and make suggestions and so forth. On the back end, it's all FHIR compatible. So the information that we're collecting in the needs assessment tool gets stored in the Michigan Health Information Network FHIR repository. So if you look at the platforms initially, there will be based on phones or tablets. And then in Q3, it will be browser-based. And then later on, it will be desktop application. So you can run it from a normal desktop. And then at Q2 of 2021, we're looking at having a secondary application available that uses the core capabilities that we've talked about. And that is going to be an EMS procedure guide. So ambulance guidance on what they should be doing. And then Q3 will be having a vaccination guide available on this platform. So with all that being said, we will be, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the application itself. Towards the end, Brian is going to take us through a demonstration. I'm done, Brian.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You see the smile on Grace's face. It means
I
you did
do.
a great job.
I tend to be long-winded, and that makes her nervous.
Next up is Eric Jan of ServingLink. He's the Chief Technology Officer of ServingLink. Go for it, Eric.
Thank you, Brian. Just a quick 5-minute discussion about a community exchange framework that's open source. As Brian said, I'm the CTO of HSLink. I'm also a consultant to HUD's technical assistance group, not affiliated at all with this project, Unify, but I'm also a consultant for multiple community exchange projects for the past 20 years. So, looking at the past 20 years, community exchanges have been built out across the US. The exchanges happen between multiple vendors, shown in the slide as the orange circles, each with their own storage or ontology, feeding into a single or multiple data warehouse, data warehouses. And that's the canister cylinder shown in the diagram. This warehouse might be open sourced or closed sourced. We see a lot of both. But this has created an expensive and fragmented arrangement where data is processed by a set of opaque vendor systems. So those are all the circles in the diagram, orange circles. Vendors only truly understand how the data is being handled and stored in each of their software systems. The community does not have insight into this process at a code level. Also, community's data is lost when new vendors are replaced with new vendors replace old ones. There is communication between the vendors and the warehouse, but each vendor uses their proprietary methods to communicate. In rare cases, freely licensed APIs, such as healthcare's Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, FHIR, that David Walsh mentioned, and integrating the healthcare enterprise are used between vendors, but the community does not control how and when each API can be used. The community should have primary control over the governance and rules by which data is stored. Lastly, the warehouse in the diagram contains stale data, as data is contributed after the fact by the vendor systems, which are really the systems of record. As a result, communities do not truly control or understand the live data workflows. Communities own no lasting community system assets, slipping back to where they started with each vendor change. We want to create a lasting community framework where the basic foundations and governance of interoperability are addressed, but we don't have these basics established. We are promoting the idea of interoperability, but we rely on disjointed vendors who each offer their product as a sole solution. I think a better framework allows all vendors to work together with the community in control at the center. Next slide, please. So this puts the community data in the middle. To give communities a better path forward for a collaborative, freely licensed, and transparent architecture, ServingLink built HSLink for a central human services data system architecture. Project Unify has adopted HSLink as its human services reference server. And through Project Unify, we are looking for more community partners. This central blue circle in the diagram is not a stale data warehouse, but it's a system which actually actively controls the data flows for the community. We put the data at the center and actually make the warehouse handle the primary data governance, real-time sharing, consent controls, and linkages to other systems. This is implemented and auditable by the community, not the vendor only. The idea is that communities do not have to go it alone developing the system, and they can all work together to share the lift. Any feature enhancement is shared by all, so there can be collaborative development. We built HSLink using freely licensed APIs and software. Simply open is not good enough. You have to examine the license and how the APIs are permitted to be used outside the content of the specific vendor. I meant context, sorry. For accountability, transparency, and system control, a community's core information system must be freely licensed. So HSLink is to human services, in my opinion, what HAPI, the Health API server, is for health. And we actually will be using HAPI for a new version for our person matching functionality. HSLink is built as a general human services system, not just for housing, and nothing at the core is specific to a funding source or domain, as it is with HAPI, which is specifically for health. And ServingLink wants to partner with any communities that wish to take control of their community data in exchange. To demonstrate one funding source, ServingLink has added functionality meeting HUD's Homeless Management Information System and coordinated housing referrals and entry standards. But workforce development, health interfaces, and family services, et cetera, are future objectives for community partner collaboration. We are not proposing to do away with app vendors, so you'll see them in the blue circle in the diagram, but rather having them focus around real-time communication with HSLink's centrally governed data source. we are trying to build a framework where everyone can work together. Proprietary apps are welcome, as well as open source apps that maybe the community contributes. We're building a marketplace of human services apps that should also work with the Smart on Fire health applications. Government funders and foundations will enjoy the auditability and ownership of the resulting features they support. Funder-specified reference implementations and hackathons are also possible using this shared method. Next slide, please. So I really don't want to get into technical stuff here, but if you could please pass this on to your technical colleagues. I just wanted to share with you the basic architecture of HSLink. This slide shows a high-level overview of the kind of the data flows of HSLink's cloud.
Oh, sorry, I rushed you there.
Oh, it's okay. I'm actually on to the next one. And then this slide just shows the components of HSLink. All the code's on GitHub. If you go to hslink.com, you can navigate to the code on GitHub. So in closing, consider collaborating with ServingLink's HSLink and Project Unify. Do more with fewer resources, freeing up time to achieve greater control over your data. This leads to more equitable human services outcomes. Thank you.
And now Matt Bishop, CEO of Open City Labs.
Hi, everybody. As Brian said, I'm Matt Bishop from Open City Labs. Oh, well, it looks like I'm going to only have 2 minutes. So we are building really a community.
Don't worry, you've got 5. I'll compress.
Okay. We have built a community exchange, and our aim is to connect healthcare providers, community-based organizations, and government agencies. And there are kind of 4 major components: eligibility, streamlining referral, and applying for government benefits. Next slide, please. So the problem is that the systems in the health, both from a healthcare and human services perspective and the technology perspective, are siloed. Next slide, please. And so what Open City, and this is also goes for applications for government programs, which remain very PDF focused and not API focused. Next slide, please.
You're going to get it through in 2 minutes anyway.
So what we do is combine elements from multiple sectors in a common case management software application, while enabling organizations to screen for eligibility and apply for government programs and make referrals across domains. Next slide, please.
I think that's it.
Yep. So
change.
Okay, next slide. Click. Keep clicking. And what we do is we've aggregated information about over 300 government programs across 30 agencies. And our vision is that first we must enable interoperability. Click. That we have a common AI integration engine which semantically maps data across all 300 programs, that normalizes that data. We provide a one-stop shop for government programs where
All right, well, welcome back, everybody.
Are you back, Matt?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so is everybody back?
Just about. We had around 30 before I see 27.
Okay. It's good to know that a few more minutes. So I guess since I now know that I have a little more time, let me just, the context of where I come from and how I came to this, my understanding of this problem, how I see the need to make change across systems is I got my start. I actually started working at Manhattan Psychiatric Center and Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center after graduate school. And then I later managed close to $100 million in healthcare and social service programs across a broad variety of government agencies, and then taught myself to code and work in technology for a number of years before coming back to realize that a lot of the systems and workflows and in terms of helping people access programs kind of remain siloed across multiple agencies. And from the perspective of human service providers and healthcare providers that might want to help their clients access these programs, there's, as Brian has talked about, there's no standards oftentimes across human service organizations. Data is represented semantically different. And so how do we do this at scale given the scope of the challenges that a family like the Thompson family face? And so really our focus has been how can we do this without the very expensive cost that oftentimes comes with human service systems integration, and especially identifying that this particular data element is similar to this data element. And so what we do is we start with an AI integration engine, which is essentially able to map data across different standards and take unstructured text from a PDF, automatically generate web forms so that the application data can be automatically pulled in from electronic medical records and case management software. And our vision is that by being able to reuse data from that's already in the EHR or in the case management software, that by being able to pull that in, we can autofill applications for government programs like SNAP, WIC, et cetera. And so we in addition to the kind of traditional community resources that we that you see in many referral platforms, we also do provide kind of a product for the government benefits itself. It's too. Also, we're really aiming to bring new human service providers onto a protocol of a national directory known as the DIRECT protocol. And altogether, all this data, in order to have this individual 360-degree view, we need to be able to be pulling in data from different sectors in order to be able to better understand progress against health equity. Doing this on a kind of a population health level, that's what we aim to do. And ultimately, our goal, and we're moving on and looking for partnerships to integrate Medicaid claims data so we can show the impact that social determinants of health initiatives can have on moving the line on both human wellness and reducing healthcare costs. Next slide, please. Is that the end?
I think you're up. That's the
Great.
end.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Matt. Next up is Stephanie Artson from MIHIN, the Michigan Health Information Network and Interoperability Land.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So as Brian stated, I am with the Interoperability Institute, which is a subsidiary of the Michigan Health Information Network. MIHIN really focuses a lot on the Michigan market of services and providing the health information network for the state. And the Interoperability Institute is our research and development portion of the company. About a year ago, we ventured down a path of taking a standard FHIR sandbox that we had spun up and loaded with our test data and found it just really wasn't good enough. It didn't suit the needs of what we needed and then what some other folks could have used it for. So we took that concept and we built a tool called Interoperability Land, which is hosted in the cloud. And we put our synthetic data that we curate in our own departments in a very strategic format. And I'll go about that I'll talk more about that in another slide. But the whole purpose is to do testing of apps and services without the risk of using PHI and disclosing sensitive patient information. This is all focused a lot on the HL7 FHIR standards, and all the synthetic patient data is FHIR based. Next slide, please. So our synthetic data, we really have two types of data. We have Patient Gen, which is a tool that we created that produces large quantities of data at scale. And this is done with a simulation technique. It was based off of the Cynthia tool, but it really creates thousands and thousands of patient resources based on the parameters that we plug into the tool, such as if we wanted to create data for a specific state other than Michigan, we could say we want all the patients to reside in Washington, DC, and we want to focus on diabetic patients and so on and so forth. So it creates the patient demographics, and we can do it over a series of time. So we can say we want 5 years worth of data. Some of the patients will get sick, some of them will get better, some of them will go through treatment, some of them will pass away. So it's very realistic sets of synthetic data at a large scale. The opposite to that, if you will, are our persona data. And Brian talked about the Thompson family. Here we have Sarah Thompson, who is our opioid persona. We take the data that's needed and we really do it by hand. We handcraft a story around a person. So while patient gen is all done sort of at the roll of the dice, we don't control what happens to the patients. The personas are opposite to that, where we really make a story around the patient. We give them a face, give them a picture, and we write a story on their care, essentially. Sarah, for example, could go through methadone treatment and is in for a year, and we create all those FHIR resources for that whole year of treatment and plug that into the environment. Next slide, please. So this is sort of a picture, if you were to think of IOL in your head. On the left there, you have our synthetic data. In the middle is really the core of the interoperability land platform. So each of those pictures and descriptions represent a FHIR server. You'll notice that the State Health Information Network is sitting in the middle there, collecting all the data just like it does in the real world. But then the data, we take it and we map it across that, just like you would find in the real world. So if you go to a hospital outside of your care network, and the data gets transferred to 3 other care networks, it's going to be replicated here in our environment. We have insurance payers, we have pharmacy information, and then all the EHRs. And then we worked with Dave, as Dave pointed out, when he created his app. You're able to, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody asked in the chat, that's called Prepare, correct? Prapare. Yes.
Correct.
Nothing. Yes. Okay. So Dave.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it is correct.
No worries. Dave took his app and connected it into IOL and was able to test all the things that needed to be done using the IOL environment instead of trying to test with real data. And that's essentially what it was built for, amongst many other things. But the smart app development portion of it is really what we used it for the proof of concept that we're talking about today. And I will now.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
So I don't expect you to be able to see most of what's on the screen here, nor am I going to try to cover it. This is simply an eye chart to show you that the data flow required in order to meet the needs of the Integrated Care for Kids program is significant, it's complicated, and we can't possibly try to solve it with any one big solution. However, we have determined through our various user stories and the use cases associated with the user stories that there are certain, we've been, for lack of a better word, we've been calling them intersections of interoperability, specific pieces of data that can be exchanged between information domains, between systems to enable us to come up with solutions for challenges. In this particular demo, we're demoing Sarah Thompson, who's a divorced single parent. She's in rehab for substance abuse. Her children are in foster care with her mother because of her substance abuse issues. She managed to total her car while driving under the influence, so she doesn't have transportation, under the poverty level, can't afford rent, can't afford food, can't afford childcare. So the challenges for Sarah that we want to be able to enable solutions for is she must be able to complete rehab in order to satisfy the court and regain custody of her children. But even once she regains custody of her children, she's going to need food assistance, housing assistance. She's going to go to work. She needs childcare. She probably needs training for a better job, and she's going to need either housing close to her work or she's going to need transportation. So these are all things that we can start to address if we're able to exchange information between systems. For this particular demo, Sarah happens to go to the doctor, or actually has a telemedicine event scheduled with the doctor. They ask her to take a prepare survey in advance. And that involves information from the EHR patient record, social determinants of health information being exchanged between the prepare survey app on her phone and an electronic health records system. But that in turn can be used to trigger a care coordination or social service case management system to exchange, by exchanging that SDOH data with a case management system to trigger a social worker to, or care manager to care coordinator to attempt to address the food insecurity and childcare insecurity challenges. And this is how it looks on the screen. And now I'm going to go very quickly, since we're running out of time, to an actual demo of this. Bear with me. Silence. Now share screen.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, here we go. 6 minutes worth of this.
When a patient prepares for a telehealth appointment, such as the NAA persona Sarah Thompson, they are often asked to take one of a number of different healthcare surveys in advance of the appointment. The Prepare survey was created by the National Association of Community Health Centers to collect some basic demographic information from the patient, along with social determinants of health information. Originally, patients were expected to fill this form out on paper, but with time, the Prepare survey was adapted to use the standard for digital health interoperability called FHIR. We have since adapted the original Prepare survey into a mobile device app for Android or iPhone that uses FHIR to connect interoperably. This adaptation uses Flutter, which is the open source UI toolkit released by Google in 2018. Flutter gives specific advantages for cross-platform mobile app development, and it will soon be available on the web. This way, Sarah could answer the questions on a phone, tablet, website, or computer with a consistent experience across platforms. If Sarah speaks another language than her care team, our app can help her navigate her care across translations and locales. As Sarah works her way through the survey, she encounters these material insecurity questions, such as whether she has had any difficulty getting food or obtaining childcare over the last year. There are other questions as well, and each question contains an optional answer choice in case Sarah chooses not to answer it. In either case, once Sarah is done with the survey, she would click on Submit. Once submitted, Sarah's survey data can be connected interoperably to a server that follows the FHIR standard. The benefit of using FHIR is that it is a global standard for healthcare data interoperability, including electronic health records. If, for example, Sarah's survey results are uploaded to the healthcare provider's electronic health records system, each combination of question and answer would be stored in Sarah's medical record as an observation, and each response may be associated with a relevant condition code in a manner that helps Sarah's care team provide the resources and referrals that she might need. For example, food insecurity would have a condition, health concern created in Sarah's medical record. As part of Sarah's well-being care team, the local social services agency is notified of Sarah's change in healthcare status. They're using a product called Navigator from Open City Labs. For each of the agency's care team clients, Navigator subscribes to changes in their social determinants of health in the local electronic health record system, either directly or through a regional health information exchange.
I'm Matt Bishop, and this is a demo of Open City Labs Navigator. Here we can see where the Prepare app has indicated a change in the food insecurity status for Sarah Marie Thompson. You can subscribe to that. So here you can see the question and responses, and we've highlighted the fact that Sarah can't access food and childcare. You can also see the broader patient journey over the last year. And if we want to help Sarah access these services, we can click on this. Here, you've generated some recommendations of goals. These are goals. This particular one is associated with Gravity Project and associated with food insecurity. The code, the Prepare app, set of services, government programs that are recommended based on the food insecurity determination. But first, let's turn to childcare, because Sarah really wants to get back to work, but she's afraid without childcare, she's not going to be able to do that. So the childcare resource and referral centers, we can see the nearest one that's closest to Sarah for her home residence. And by clicking refer, we can indicate which organization we want to select to make this referral to. And here we have different providers, different individuals that specifically receive these referrals and respond to these particular programs. You can record Sarah's consent, and we've generated a automatic message to those providers indicating their referral. And then those providers would get a dashboard, much like you saw when we began the demo. Now let's turn to the food insecurity challenge. So we know from her determination that she's on SNAP that she's going to be eligible for WIC. And so we're going to help her apply for that program. And so here, this is in a referral form automatically has been generated from the PDF. And what we're doing here is simulating, pulling in the electronic medical record data into these government application forms that are standardized or required to fill out these particular forms. And then we've moved these programs and services across 30 agencies, these application forms. And then even if there is not an integration with the agency directly, we can provide this as a PDF, either we download it or faxed automatically to the agency. Very shortly, we will be supporting direct, and we'll be able to attach that message, that PDF onto a direct message, and it can go off to one of the healthcare WIC providers like Monitor, for example. I just want to tell you one other thing. If there's other healthcare or social determinants of health needs for Sarah, we have this kind of map view of all the services that Sarah might be interested in her community from across the full social determinants. So thanks, and I appreciate your listening to our demo from Open City Labs.
Thank you very much, folks, for listening to the that video of the demonstration. We had considered doing that demo live, but given the very tight time constraints, and the prospective demos, you know, Murphy visits every time you try to do a demo. Doing this video seemed like a better idea. This was the January demo, single parent family SDOH demo. And in November, you can find on YouTube or on actually on the National Interoperability Collaborative Hub, you can find the November demo, which was a homeless SDOH demo, involving a homeless management information system based on HSLink and OCL Navigator. In February, we're demo of I think it's going to be either a rehab or a homeless COVID alerts demo, where somebody within a congregate housing facility comes down with COVID, but for one reason or another doesn't want their doctor to know that they're either homeless or in rehab, which of course creates a small problem. How do you turn around and let the congregate facility know that that person has COVID and should not be put back in with the general population, at the same time protecting their privacy? So it's an interesting consent challenge. And then in March, April, and beyond, we'll be working on integrated care for kids demos. So those are all demos that you can look forward to over the coming months. Oh, I never did set this up as a slideshow. So discussion and next steps. Grace, first a question: how many minutes do we have left?
Have about 5 or 6 minutes left.
Okay. Well, that's not too bad, given all of the craziness that happened in the past hour. Do folks have any questions that they want to put up either in the chat or in person?
This is Richard Taylor. I'd like to ask a question. That was a great session, a great presentation of what is going on in our world right now. We're like open data labs in that we have a system that works like theirs does. And of course, our question is, we're proprietary. And so how do we move towards an open systems platform? I'm assuming that would be a phased approach, that we would start working with standards groups. That's our question, is how do we move from our current platform and start engaging with the open systems, open standards world?
Yeah, I think open standards is definitely it's almost like the answer to the question you posed. There's lots of different proprietary systems, and the problem is that in order for multiple systems to be able to exchange, we need to agree upon a way of sending data. We believe that moving human service providers to something like Direct, where there is a national crowdsourced 2.5 million healthcare providers that are already part of this national directory within healthcare, we think that bringing human service providers on that would provide kind of a jumpstart for healthcare and human services interoperability.
How does Direct compare to the open referral platform that's being offered to do the same thing?
So open referral is a set of APIs, whereas Direct is a protocol for transport. You could attach like a FHIR resource to it. It was originally started by the ONC and is now managed by a trade organization called Direct Trust. And it also maintains an actual directory. So every electronic medical record company that is compliance with Meaningful Use 2 supports Direct. And I'm on several committees, both within Direct and 360X and Gravity project. Gravity is not associated with Direct, but to enable closed loop referral between different electronic medical records. And we're trying to advance those standards between healthcare and human services organizations. So I'm helping to write the implementation guide for healthcare to human services referrals that leverage direct as part of the protocol, but certainly participating in standards making organizations that embrace open standards is I would say is the way forward.
I would add in that direct is just one of multiple different standards that we are looking at. We are also making use of FHIR for exchanging information. For example, this demo and the November demo made use of FHIR for exchanging healthcare information. In the November demo, we were using a FHIR subscription API for exchanging SDOH information, oddly enough, between a homeless management information system and a referral management case management system. No EHR, no healthcare system involved at all. So it's not like FHIR is, you can only use FHIR within a healthcare context. So what we're looking at here is what in the Project Unify is, what is the mix of standards that we can take advantage of, leverage to solve these intersections of interoperability, whether they're FHIR subscriptions or FHIR service requests, or 360X and direct for closed loop referrals. Possibly in the case of the courts, we might be doing National Information Exchange Model, NEAM messages. Well, what's the transport for that? Could it be NEAM on FHIR, which is one of the things that Dave and I have played with in the past, or is it NEAM as an attachment to a direct trust message between a child welfare system and a court clerk? So it looks like we've got about 2 minutes left. Let me put one more answer, Richard, into your question, which is this notion of baby steps, identifying specific small pieces of data that can make a real difference in terms of enabling some next step towards well-being for an individual. And at that point, identifying how you're going to map that data between the standards associated with the different information domains, and then what protocol you're going to make use of to exchange that information. This is what we were calling intersections of interoperability. I coined that term, and yet every time I say it, I squirm a little bit. So if anybody has a better word for it, let me know.
So just to add to what Brian said, direct is not going to represent the clinical data like a patient FHIR resource. It's more of a protocol for transport, and it's for organizations like referral platforms that you oftentimes hear, like in Bertha or Unite Us being mentioned. There's this problem that one organization may have a community resource, a food pantry, that the other organization does not. So how do we crowdsource? How do we make sure we're all sharing that basic data of who is who with your healthcare or human service organization? And direct helps to solve that problem so that different platforms can make referrals between one another. So there's multiple standards that have to be part of this solution, but that's just one example.
Direct is encrypted, secure SMTP email with a directory of who has accounts that can be encrypted. It's fairly simple.